Welcome to the AI Assisted Organization podcast with myself, Piers Linney, and my co-host and co-founder of Implement AI, Dr. Alok Shukla, who is still in Mumbai.
How are you, Piers?
I'm very good. I got as far as Cornwall, as I mentioned it last week, at Anthropy, which was it's about building a better Britain, people, place, planet, prosperity. And I did probably maybe 7 or 8 sessions, almost all focused on artificial intelligence, or it formed a big part of the conversation or the panel discussion. And it was amazing. It always amazes me when you canvass a room of, say, 200 people. You say, put your hand up if you're using this technology just personally, just Chat GPT Plus, a paid version, and maximum 4% put their hands up.
Oh.
And I keep saying, it's like going into a fist fight and you can take Iron Man and you can't be bothered.
I just don't see how, and today's episode is going to unravel and reveal even more of it. But it's profound.
Today's episode is a big one. So normally we try and focus on, a bit of news and then I have a theme, AI for business. I think this week we're rolling it all into one. There's been a huge slew of announcements from OpenAI, and that's the company that created ChatGPT. And they had their first dev day. So all these big companies have these kind of big days where, remember the old kind of Apple launch with Steve Jobs and his black roll neck. Sam Altman was doing his version of that, but this was their first. It's kind of aimed at developers. So what we're trying to do is to make it more relevant and understandable for business use cases. There is some other news this week, which it sounds like it was big news till this happened. XAI, Elon Musk and the Grok AI has been launched, and Runway ML has updated itself, and there's lots of other things going on. But, once again, OpenAI has just changed the game.
They're small fish, and this is the whale.
Yeah, absolutely right. And if you think about where we were, I don't know what, beginning of this year, GPT-3, Turbo and 4, and it's a game changer. So we're gonna crack on because there's a lot to get into, and we'll do a few updates about Implement AI as well. So again, this was an event held in San Francisco. There was an audience of real live people there as well, who all got $500 of OpenAI Azure credits. It was quite nice for them. And also Satya Nadella just turned up as well, which we'll touch upon as well. But essentially, this was their first day they're rolling out features that are going to be in ChatGPT, but a lot of it was about how do you use this technology, how do you use their platform as a developer, and how do you build on it? And I think that the kind of overall summary really is that whenever, there were things we discussed on the podcast last week or the week before that we were kind of complaining about, I think this needs to be fixed, and it's being fixed. So if you look at that kind of exponential curve, where are we going? How do we go from AI to AGI? Yeah, well, upgraded, I suppose. Yeah, things have been, some are upgraded, some are actually new, aren't they? In terms of the way that they're doing things as well. So let's get into it. So the real big news, it's all big news, let's just go through them. So they've got a new model, right? So they've all been using GPT-4 with about a 32,000 token context window. GPT-4 Turbo now has 128,000 tokens in terms of its
bigger than Claude
window. That's bigger than Claude. We often say that we use Claude because it's got a very big context window. Well, now it's smaller than OpenAI's, and this, to give you an idea, is about 96,000 words. Previously, the GPT-4 was a 32,000 tokens, so it's a massive shift.
300-page book.
300-page book, and I was watching some YouTube videos and reading some articles about it, saying that people think that within a year we'll be at 1 million tokens, right? So 1 million tokens is essentially the average human reads 5 to 10 books a year, and it's all that information is going to be, you'll be able to actually send it to a large language model in a prompt.
It's profound. One of the biggest things that I found with Claude, I like it a lot, but for example, I would load in a whole lecture or a whole load of PDFs that I'd written or a load of content, and then I would work with that content with Claude to then write and create more content. But the problem I always found is that if you load it with a lot of context, your conversation also forms part of the context, and then you start running out. And then what would happen is you'd basically reach, I'd say, to the interesting part of the conversation, and then it says, sorry, your context window has been reached. And so I always found that that's a bit frustrating, because then you have to then restart in a new window and preload everything in. Again, what you're saying here is that this, number one, it's a larger context window, but also number two, GPT-4 Turbo is smarter. It's showing many different things where it can actually understand multiple things within one prompt. The accuracy's gone up, and we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. But this is profound, and this links into number two as well, right? Because that context window can be in multiple forms as well.
Yeah, so I'll go on to number two. So moving on, multimodal. So you've heard us talk about this almost every week for months. And multimodal is, you've got text, you've got vision now. These models can hear, they can speak, you can talk to them, and that makes a big difference in terms of how you interact with these models.
In
And it
one
was great.
conversation.
Yeah, at the beginning of the OpenAI event, they were showing that people who were physically disabled were able to use the model because they could actually talk to it. The chap who was I think he was paralyzed down one side, had nerve damage, and he can now talk to technology quite literally. So that was quite important. So these APIs now can process different data types. They have different interfaces, and that's making it just more accessible. And the big one is now, we mentioned last week, I think, is that it's such a pain going into ChatGPT Plus, for example, and swapping between the models, whether you want to use plugins,
Because
DALL-E, text, and now you
they're
don't.
different context. They're different context before. So you could only have like a image generation DALL-E one in one conversation, a code interpreter one in a different one, or like a ChatGPT one in a third one. But now you could actually send a photo, for example, of let's say an outline of a web page. You can then say, okay, please mock up some versions of me using DALL-E 3 or whatever like that. And then you can say, okay, I want to talk with you and like work on create some code for it using the code interpreter. So you can already use like multiple different versions within one thing. It's like,
There's
honestly,
plugins
this
as well. Plugins were a pain because you
and
couldn't.
it'll browse the
Yeah,
internet
you
when needed.
decided you decided you want a different plugin halfway through what you were doing. You couldn't do that. You had to go and start all over again.
So now this is, I would say this is literally the closest thing to a digital human sat next to you. We always said it's a super smart intern and everything like this, but before you had different interns. Now all those interns have been combined into one, basically. So you got the data analyst guy, who's also the designer, who's also like the website designer, who's also like the writer, who's also the analyst. They're all sat there,
Well,
and then
let's keep going, Alan, because there's also going to be lots of other assistants as well, which is and this is where it becomes really quite interesting. Another quick one, a seed. So if you use things like Midjourney and you create an image, there's a seed. So if you want to create a similar image, you can use that seed and it will kind of create something which is similar. It's in that kind of vein. So they now have seeds as well on reproducible output, which is quite
yes,
important for businesses because then you want to have, a house style or a tone of voice. So that's something that's been added as well.
yeah. And so this is all leading the models to be much more controllable in their output. One of the criticisms of these LLMs was that like it could be brilliant and genius one time, and then the variability of the quality would be different on something else. Now I have to say, personally, depending on the kind of work that we've worked on, I've not really seen that too much, but it has been a criticism based on how the prompt was engineered and all that kind of stuff. So again, that's where prompt engineering came in. But these different ones like are it builds on prompt engineering because you can actually have the seed and example of what you want to have to come out with. But this
But
is
it's
just
different to
leaning
temperature.
perfectly.
Yeah, but
Yes,
temperature was
yes, yes,
where
yes.
there's a slider normally where you can have it more. Is it sort of very sort of programmatic and direct and sort of there's no flexibility in it. And as you increase the temperature, there's more creativity. Now, some people argue that the creativity is just adding more and more nonsense. So this isn't that apparently. This is a different. It's more like the image-based seeds, and also they've also created. Something else which allows you to create content that is increasingly similar. So it's slightly different to the seeds. So this is all being built in, and this is important to corporates and anyone in business. And this is why you're seeing it appear on the platforms. Moving on. So the other really annoying aspect of, I think, OpenAI's models was that the age of the background data, the age of the training. So it was kind of September 2021 that they kind of brought it forwards. And now they've brought it forwards to April 2023, which is not too long ago. I think this is partly because, it's just annoying having a model that is sort of that out of date, given the fact how quickly the world is changing now. And also they're now in competition with XAI. So they have Twitter. They're using Twitter to access reality. I mean, you can argue about that, about whether that is reality, whether you want models trained on Twitter, who knows? But I think increasingly you're going to see it sort of catch up. You're going to see that gap eventually close down to, days, hours, and minutes.
Yes, no, totally. And like also like GPT can like browse the web when needed, right? So you have that dynamic element within there as well. But the key thing is that like the foundation model that's available to everybody has been trained in up to April 2023 information. That's insane. You understand? Like the majority of stuff apart from news and current affairs is within there now, basically, right? And if there's news and current affairs, you can just use the browsing function to like access those things, or supplement it with other data sets and everything like this. But I mean, it was already powerful, and like now it's just even more.
Or now, as we'll come on to, you've got fine tuning, custom models, and assistants, and GPT. So that's going to go away if you want to make sure that does happen yourself. So the other big one is text to speech and Whisper version 3. Now Whisper is their model. It's their text to speech model, which is very, very good. It's even better now. They actually Sam Altman gave an example of it speaking. It was amazing. So it's kind of voice to text, and it's actually open source, which I wasn't really aware of that. So you now get enhanced voice synthesis and voice recognition. And what this is going to allow us to do is to create much more natural human interactions. I think we said last week that, the day that you literally cannot tell whether you're speaking to a human or a machine in a conversation, whether it's on the phone, whether it's at a drive-through, no matter where it is, whether it's from an avatar or you can't actually see the other person, the machine. The day that happens, the idea of humans answering phones just goes away. And I think that's next year.
I think it'll be noticeable because the human will be less helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to have access to all that data. It can do right first time for your customer service, consistent tone of voice. You don't have to train them. You just update the background information.
No emotion.
And they all know instantaneously. I think 2024 is the year that you start to see machines taking over
voice everywhere.
Service. Yeah. Now, moving on from that, fine tuning and custom models. So custom models are slightly different. This is where OpenAI are going to consult with very large companies with very big checkbooks to create, custom solutions. It's not really something that we're going to be focused on, but fine tuning is. So fine tuning is the ability to take a model and tune it to a specific need or specific task or a specific sort of sector requirement or regulatory requirement, whatever it might be. And that's something you can now do in the back end using the API. And that's a massive, massive win, because not being able to fine tune these things, unless you're a very, very large enterprise, has been something which has really held adoption of this technology back.
Yeah, and then it would require like a fair bit of coding to be able to fine tune a model or create different things or patch different tools together. And this is just making that a lot easier. So I think we've talked a little bit about the news bit. So I just want to recap a little bit on the speech bit as well, because what this means is that you're going to have like voice assistants and so many different internal tools within your business and external facing ones to customers, where it's just going to be a lot easier to work with. And you can even see AIs within a meeting. So when people are talking on Teams and stuff like this, you could even then just have the AI as part of that Teams meeting, right? In that conversation almost, where it's contributing directly to what's going on and acting as an impartial advisor. So I think we're going to see some really interesting shifts and things. And then also when it comes to fine tuning, if you've got let's say a medical use case, or you've got an architectural use case, or you've got something really specific, and you've got a lot of context and a lot of foundational information that you want it to be within there, then this means that you can then lean on that knowledge to do most of the processing rather than the foundational GPT knowledge. And it also means that your application will run much more efficiently as well. So they're just making these into the digital Swiss Army knife that can do anything, basically, right? You can build anything on it.
But we're rapidly getting to the point, though, as well, where which we're going to come on to, GPTs, AI agents, something that we focus on, which are basically what GPTs are in a way, is that you're going to be able to have an AI that understands what you're thinking, what your position is, in a meeting if you're not there.
Yeah.
And when somebody says something that's relevant to your position, you disagree with or agree with, it'll actually respond. That's not far away.
Yeah, and imagine, for example, you've got some Google Docs which you'd been writing on, or your SharePoint or whatever it is. It could even highlight and surface relevant bits for the meeting from that, basically, isn't it? Actually, Paul had talked about this in a PowerPoint presentation. I put a summary here for you in this. I mean, I don't know if it happened to you, but I often find things I've written, I'm like, oh, I forgot I even wrote that. You understand? And then so even though I'm aware of having written it at the time, I don't have that accessible at the point. But it's not going to be far off, where just like on a Mac or a PC, you type into in the search magnifying glass, you type in whatever it is, and it will show you anything on your computer which has got that, basically, isn't it? Now imagine that, but within a meeting, in the context of what you're working on, it could surface to you and say, hey, here's these things which might be interesting and useful for you. That's coming, basically, proactive help.
Yeah, so let's keep going, because as we keep going through this, you'll see that all of the, or many of the blockers that we have faced with clients, our discussions about, they are rapidly going away. And then we'll give you Sam Altman's what he said right at the end, which is quite interesting as well in terms of where this is going. And just very quickly, so rate limits. So something we struggle with is rate limits. So there are limits on how many calls you can have on these APIs, unless you're a ChatGPT enterprise customer, and who knows what that actually costs. So they've doubled the rate limits, which is fantastic. That means that this makes your ability to use the APIs at sort of scale far more helpful, more interesting for us and our clients, and it helps and it prevents system overload where you're kind of waiting for things to happen, which can be super frustrating. And the other one, small one really, which is quite important, we mentioned it almost every week, is copyright. So you've seen Microsoft do this, Adobe do this, I think Google have done this, and now OpenAI are saying that if you use their models and you generate content and there's a copyright infringement claim against you based on that output, that content created by these models, they will protect you, they will back you up, and they will underwrite any loss or cost that you suffer.
I mean, basically, all the big boys have basically pulled their checkbooks out, and then like almost daring the lawyers to like have a go, basically, isn't it? Like, I mean, AI as a content partner is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Any of these philosophical debates about different things about how it is or who owns it, I think it's been very clearly established in this way now. So we have to basically just leverage it, partner with it, co-create with it, because that's the world now.
And the law, I'm a lawyer, right? The law eventually will catch up, and it will fall on the side of the rational outcome of where this needs to go. Now, another small one, if you're technical, you can now have JSON outputs as well, which is something I looked very excited.
Yes, I was already playing with these before, basically. Like, so you can essentially take any object, picture, like a description and anything, and then you can then have it like outputting in JSON is basically a way that like programs talk to each other. So it means that you can have everything in a very discrete way. And previously, what would happen is it was inconsistent. So if you would ask it to do two things, like boil a kettle and also turn on a light, and then it would maybe pass the boil the kettle instruction, but not the light. And then you have to ask it, what about the light? And then it would do that afterwards, basically, right? Like, so now it can take multi-dimensional questions or statements or instructions, and it will pass them. It will like process them perfectly. So the thing is,
it's that unstructured to
structured.
It's that unstructured to structured that we talked about as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
Anyway, let's move on from JSON. People will fall asleep. But and listen, right, that was the warm up. Okay, if so, don't go away, because the next half of this conversation is where it actually starts to get really quite
I thought it was
interesting.
already.
So, a few updates on. I mean, that's the warm up, right? So what we've had, and then I think what we need to do is sort of summarize really what this all means. But again, they're just ticking off all the boxes about what it is that we often sit here on this podcast talking about in terms of what we need.
The tools to build any business. Like, okay, it's like, okay, here's a tool to build a website. Here's a tool to like build any kind of like e-commerce thing you want. Here's a tool to like build a physical.
Right, you're spoiling it now.
Okay.
No, that's a spoiler alert. Right. So implement AI. So very quickly, again, our white papers, very important. We actually published a white paper a couple of weeks ago about AI agents, which we're actually going to come on to talk about, because OpenAI is sort of making it easier to create these agents and deliver them to our clients. Sign up to our AI Insider newsletter. It's our weekly newsletter based on our podcast and various insights that we like to share. And if you haven't started yet, now is the time, right? Because we always say implement AI before your competition does, right? And this train is leaving the station. The ship is leaving the harbour. That was my sort of favourite analogy at Anthropy last week.
Space shuttle is leaving.
And you need to get on. And the first and the way you do that is, initially at least, is training, understanding how these things work, where it's going, threats, opportunities, workflows. What can you do? When can you do it? And how do you start learning? Okay, that's really important. And typically, people start working with us training or our AI Activate, which is a 60-day sprint, policy, governance, the framework, training, and also a 60-day sprint, looking at how do you start implementing AI in your business and start to become an AI-assisted organization, workflow by workflow, process by process, person by person, department by department, because that's how you have to do it. You can't just go from 0 to 5 on our AI scale.
Agree, and also because everything's like shifting, you really need to have like an AI strategy session, like to understand like what is going to impact your industry and plan ahead now. Because things that we were talking about 3 months ago or even 2 months ago are all already solved. And to be honest, I thought some of these would be next year. I was talking about multimodal in, I think, in June. I thought that it would be like next year, where you could literally feed in an email and it would be able to like critique not just the text of the email but the images and give you a better thing. Now it could already do that. It could actually like look at your email, look at your image, even suggest better images and whole better email. I mean, this is just devastating, like powerful. Like it's just
I
crazy.
mean, it is interesting how, again, I've written blogs about this, where if you're a SaaS business, if you're this thin layer above these, think about it, right? You got this sort of foundational technology. You see the big opportunity where the biggest problem is with it in terms of people using it. So you build a business around solving that problem. The platform owners think, well, actually, that's a huge opportunity for us as well, a big blocker. People using our technology, they just roll it out on the platform.
We were
So
listening
you're
to
kind of disintermediating
we were listening
everyone.
to a very nice, presentation about like upgraded AI voices like 2 weeks ago, right? And they were talking about how you'd use this in like real time agents and stuff like this. And GPT, OpenAI have released very good voices, very nice sounding voices, and as part of their system. So are you really going to use different API? Like, no, like,
Well, let's get into the second half, right, of the OpenAI Dev Day, which is the really interesting half. So the first one is setting it up. So a big one, we talked about rate limits. Another one's price cuts, right? So whenever you are inputting information, data, context to a model, you get charged per token. And when it creates an output, you get charged as well. So they are essentially making the service far more affordable. So GPT-4 Turbo, which is a better model, the best model out there, is going to be on a blended average in terms of input output about 2.7 times cheaper than it was. So that that cost reduction plus the increase in the rate limits, or reduction in the rate limits, when you look at it, means that using these models now is faster and it's cheaper for better technology.
yeah. So this means that you can basically like pour even more data, even more workflows, everything much more into these systems, and they're going to be very affordable. The data and privacy thing has already been solved, where they've already said we're not going to use these things to train our models and all that kind of stuff. Like, so it's basically your AI labor force is ready, and it very
Well, and also means your ROI is higher, right? Because
yeah,
even with our clients, we're saying that your ROI is this based on these costs. But those costs are just start. You've got better technology, so your ROI is probably going to go up because
yes,
it's more accurate, and then your cost goes down by 2 to 3 times. So your ROI just expands.
yeah. This is like, I don't know what to put it as. Like, it's the engine basically. It's like everything's been a bicycle until now. Like, business is a bicycle. You literally pedal every workflow, right? And now what they're just giving everyone is like I don't know, what's the most powerful engine? Let's say a Tesla.
A nuclear fusion
Yeah,
reactor.
exactly. They're giving you basically a jet engine, basically, right? Like a jet engine.
Well, it's getting there. I mean, these are still steps, aren't they? But I love. We'll finish with it, right? Sam Altman's little sort of what he said at the end of it, which is just
But the
eye-opening.
bicycle is dead. So let's put it there, right?
Yeah, no, it's
You're not going to use.
this is no, this is the ability to inject intelligence into everything you do, personally or your business, at scale today. Right, moving on. So Satya Nadella appeared from backstage. He's a CEO of Microsoft. Now I don't know where he's based. Depends where his private jet wants to land, but he's definitely not based in San Francisco. I'm sure he spends a lot of time there. So he appeared there for a couple of minutes and said hello. And what was really interesting, if you sort of dig into the detail, is a couple of months ago, they invested in this deal with OpenAI and Microsoft and Azure, which is their cloud infrastructure platform. They are working very closely together. But now Shatter's Nadella standing on stage saying, we are developing Azure from the physical footprint to the GPUs to the networking, everything based on what this technology requires. So you can now see where these enormous cloud infrastructure platforms, Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, you can see where they're going. They're being geared up and optimized and now built purely for the opportunity this technology represents.
Yeah, it's the tail is wagging the dog now, basically, right? Like,
So that was really interesting, wasn't it?
yeah, and just as a funny aside, like Sam Altman was giving his presentation on a Mac, and they and obviously Satya was there on the screen, and they were talking about Microsoft. I thought that was just a funny small thing, basically. But like, yeah, I mean, Microsoft are dead serious about this, like, and they're releasing so many more things. And I think the key thing to understand here is that OpenAI is by far the most advanced system there is out there, and they are going to stay on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge. So Microsoft are going to see that at scale, faster than other people. I think 93% of the Fortune 500 are already using, OpenAI technologies and stuff like this. So I think these guys like,
Well, they have no legacy. They have no legacy. They have no product or division. They're cannibalizing.
yeah,
It was interesting. I didn't tell you this actually. I was at Anthropy, and I kept saying to people, if you do one thing today, it'll be the best $240 you spend this year. Go and sign up ChatGPT Plus and start using it. Right? Custom instructions, set it up, blah blah blah. Now we're going to go on to why there's even more reasons to. And a chat came over to me. You might be listening to this, and he said to me, when are you going to stop recommending OpenAI ChatGPT and start recommending Google? Because I work for DeepMind, and I said, well, when I know it's better,
yes,
because right now
it's not.
this is the state of the art, and that was last week. It's moved on this week. So why not use it? That's my point. Right, let's move on to the juicy stuff. So they have launched what they call GPTs. Okay, now we might call them AI agents. So essentially, these are upgrades to their conversational AI and your ability to adapt GPT models. So they call them kind of agents as well. And you can deploy these for particular tasks. They can be content generation, coding, enhancing efficiency and scalability, whatever you want to do. And it looks like it looks like. It looks like they're retiring plugins. So plugins are quite clunky, kind of app store, and we'll come on to the app store in a minute. They were quite clunky. It looks like they're going to retire those. So GPTs now are literally, you can set up in the back end, quite simply using the API, if you understand sort of code, these agents that are designed specifically to fulfill particular tasks.
Yeah. I mean, you say you're a nutritionist, right? And you want to create one specifically for, I don't know, paleo, keto, something basically, right? Like, and it can do it just specifically for that. And you can bound it and make sure that it won't go off piece and talk about accounting instructions and stuff like this. So you can actually like create different customized GPTs or AI agents or conversations or whatever you want to call it for so many different things. And there's so many tools. There's just so many tools. Like you got vision, you got sound.
But also, so all these companies, and we were looking at them. And I used one. I had Piers Bot on my website for a while. I pulled it now because it needs to evolve. This was probably 6 months ago. I created it. So all these platforms creating the ability to have a chat bot essentially that can actually access your personal information. There are lots of startups doing this, and MemGPT we talked about last week, a week before, in terms of having memory, having a large language model as an operating system. They've kind of killed all that. It was called retrieval augmented generation. All those businesses now have been replaced by a pretty simple setup in the back end of OpenAI's playground.
They're just a juggernaut, man. Seriously, and the easier they make this, it sets the bar higher for what people around them are going to have to do as well. Like even Microsoft are in the game with their own frameworks and everything like this. Like, but you look at like how easy they're making this, and also like how inspectable it is. Like you can actually see what's happening under the hood and stuff like this. Like this is massive. I'm really excited to see what comes out.
I try. We'll come on in a minute. I was setting ones on myself, but I still can't see in ChatGPT Plus the fact that it's all into one.
I think they're still rolling it out.
Sort of chat box now. They're rolling it out, and also in the playground, I can't see GPT-4 yet to create an assistant. But the interesting thing then, the obvious next step is you create GPTs, or they create GPTs, and they're fantastic. What happens then? So what happens then clearly is they retire plugins and they create an app store.
Yeah.
So what you're now going to see is a marketplace for GPTs, these AI agents. This may be where we implement AI, where we actually deploy some of our agents because they do create quite a large ROI for our customers. Maybe others will buy them, and that becomes a rev share opportunity for us and OpenAI, and our customers receive the value that these agents or GPTs create. I think
the exciting thing here is that you're going to see like entirely new workflows, entirely new tools, entirely new ways of thinking and solving problems just there. And then you're going to be able to like basically go into this like toolkit and say, okay, how can I reconstruct my business from this? Like, what can I use to kind of like create stuff? Like, honestly, the powers How is it shocking? Like, imagine you could have like a pizza inspection GPT straight away, right? Which is like just looking at all the pizzas and saying all the toppings equal or this, that. Like your QA GPTs, you can have like, audit GPTs, you could have sales GPTs, like you can have anything, marketing GPTs, content, social, whatever it is,
But that's where though, that's where some commentators though, they think that AGI will not appear in the form of a super powerful, all powerful GPT. It'll be a swarm, it'll be a collection of AI agents that when you put together all those different intelligences, know how, knowledge, learnings, access to information, then you get an
there's a very
AGI.
interesting thing actually. That there are some scientists, and the science of this is it's very good. We are not even one consciousness ourselves, right? Like, they've done experiments where they've actually split the brain. There's like the stem, this part of the corpus callosum, which links the left and right halves of the brain. And they could actually you could actually have a conversation where you show one object to the right side and one different object to the left side. And you ask question, and one can speak and one can only write. And you will find different answers from different sides, okay? So we're not even one entity in one, we're a collection of personalities, basically, right? And so imagine the AGI is going to come a bit like we saw vision, we saw code interpreter, we saw text. Well, now there's going to be agents which can then do this solution, this solution, this solution, this solution. But you just bring them together like a hive mind, basically, right? And then
Exactly that.
how is that
Yeah.
not AGI, basically? Plus, also, like they said that, like,
But it's almost like having you're saying it's like we've got like a GAN in our heads
we
where it's
do.
challenging
I've
one
been
side,
I've
challenging
been
the other.
reading a lot. I'm in India at the moment. Like, I've been reading a lot on like the different sciences of like the mind, like how things work, and like even ancient technologies and stuff like this. And honestly, what I find so interesting is like there's some stuff in ancient Hinduism where they talk about specific things they call siddhis, which are like different powers. But I was actually comparing that to AI, and I was actually mapping it like the kind of like the degree of like understanding of consciousness or ability to do this or ability to do that stuff like that to have some of the powers of AI. And like honestly, AI can already out persuade, out reassure, outsell, in different conversation forms. And that was just in text.
But that's why it's dangerous though comparing, and people often do this, human intelligence with this mechanical intelligence because the two may work in very different ways, but the outcomes, it's
AI
very
can
very
be a
similar in
laser.
terms of
Like you
capability.
look at a laser engraver, like it's able to like just like cut whatever you want from an object, right? And then human intelligence might be a bit like a torch. So you'll have so many ones which can like be tuned and do specific workflows like ruthlessly well. And I mean, honestly, like I'm really excited to see.
Well, so let's carry on. So then the next one, uh, they've created an assistance
Yeah,
API. So
big one.
this is the one where it does kind of ruin these retrieval augmented generation models where you could sort of provide your data. And I was playing my own one just before we started recording this, where I literally give a name, some information, set it up, upload documents, and then very quickly you can have the ability to talk to your documents. So that is super powerful just in its own right, especially when you're applying the power of a model like GPT-4 Turbo to it.
Yeah,
So let's just summarize, right? So you've got essentially cheaper, faster, better models. You've got rate limits taken away. You can now, all this conversation we've often had about, is it safe? Can they access my data? Are they training the models on our data? The answer is no. You can now fine tune on your particular needs. You can create custom models if you can afford it. You can now create agents and GPTs using the API in the back end and assistants using the API as well. Very, very quickly. And then not only that, create lots of them to work. That's not quite that model, but that's coming to work together to perform tasks.
you have now AI workers in kit form that can see, talk, understand, process way more accurately than anything else out there. So the question is, you can start using it because again,
That's what we do. That's what we help you do. And let me finish with the point at the end that Sam Altman said that after all of this, right, this sort of game changing, potentially world changing, all these announcements about the technology, he says, and we will welcome you back next year, and all of this will probably seem quaint. I mean, that just says it all. So, what happens between now and then? I think 2024 is going to be a
23 is
crazy
not
year
even
for this
over.
technology.
23 is not even over.
And
Google are going to start.
well, that's true,
Google are going to
actually.
be like throwing out
That is true.
Gemini, and then it's basically we're
Yeah.
watching a game of trumps. But the thing is, there's more than four aces here. There's just new ones coming out every week, basically.
That is true,
You,
actually. Yeah, you've got Google are going to have to go back and probably going to go back to the
and
drawing board
no, and
slightly now,
OpenAI will
aren't
be
they?
like, I see you, and I will
And
raise you
think,
like connectors to your
yeah,
Google Drive, to your SharePoint, to your this, to your that. Like, honestly, the consumer just wins.
no, you're right. I shouldn't give up on 2023 yet. There's
We're
still a
not
lot to
done,
come.
man. We're not.
So, listen, yeah, there's been a lot there. Alex, I can see how excited he is. I'm here. So we're going to go in and think about this ourselves. Actually, we've got a lot of work to do. We're talking to our to the tech team about how we use this ourselves. Actually, it's making our lives a bit easier, isn't it?
It brings roadmaps 12 months forward.
It has done, yeah, in some cases. I mean, there was some we were thinking about, let's do this, Q2 next year.
Yeah,
I could probably go and set it up. And I'm not, and the other thing he said, actually, we haven't really touched upon, is that, code's going away. And he said it, didn't he? He said that the new coding language is going to be natural language, going to
it
be
is.
English,
It
which
is.
is,
It
again,
is.
fascinating.
It is.
Talked about. So anyway, AI of the week, right, is Chat GPT Plus. We're using GPT-4. You can't quite get it yet, but I've seen a glimpse of it in the back end in the playground, and that's going to be an utter game changer if you start using it. So we're going to leave it there. Don't forget, sign up for AI Insider newsletter. Please download our white papers. Follow us on YouTube. Please rate this podcast if you on your favorite platform. That really does help us if you enjoy it. And please do share it with anyone you think may be interested in the future of business, technology, and potentially society.
If you're waiting for a sign, this is the sign. The start gun is gone. See you next week.
See you next week. This is AI Assisted Organization Podcast. We'll see you again next week.